Okay, let's unpack this. For decades, the greatest minds in biology and medicine, they've been fixated on two realities of mammalian life that just seemed unavoidable.
Right. Aging, that slow, inevitable breakdown of the body, and cancer.
Exactly, cancer. The rebellion of our own cells that seems to become more and more certain the longer we live.
And we spent all that time studying what we thought was the standard biological roadmap. We looked at primates, at dogs, at mice animals that, for the most part, follow the rules.
What were those rules exactly?
Well, the basic assumption was that body size has some loose correlation with lifespan and that, the more your cells divide over a lifetime, the more damage accumulates. And that damage eventually leads to tumors. It seemed like a fixed equation.
Until something extraordinary came out of the ground in East Africa and started, well, actively tearing up that roadmap.
Mm-hmm.
We are diving today into the world of the naked mole rat, Heterocephalus glaber. And visually, they are. Well, let's be honest, they're not winning any beauty contests.
No, they're not. They're these hairless, wrinkled, subterranean rodents. They're tiny, maybe the size of a mouse.
And here is the fact that should just instantly reset everything you think you know about mammalian biology. A typical house mouse in a perfect lab setting lives maybe 2-3 years.
A common brown rat might push it to 4.
The naked mole rat, the NMR, routinely lives for 30 to 40 years.
30 to 40.
That is an order of magnitude increase. I mean, if we found a shrew that lives longer than an elephant, this would be that level of biological shock.
It's completely off the charts. But that longevity, as amazing as it is really only half the story.
Right, because the core mystery we are tackling today, the thing that made biologists everywhere just drop everything and focus on this tiny animal, is the cancer paradox.
For decades, scientists observed thousands of these animals. I'm talking multiple research centers, captive animals, wild populations. They were actively looking for tumors.
They were expecting to see that inevitable age-related spike in cancer, right?
Exactly, the mortality driven by mutation and disease. And they found, well, essentially nothing.
Nothing.
No spontaneous tumors, no predictable cancer diagnosis as they got older. Cancer is, for all practical purposes, prevented from ever even starting in this species. They are the most cancer-resistant mammal we know of.
So just to be clear, they aren't just surviving cancer better. They're stopping the very mechanisms that kick it off in the first place.
That's the key.
So our mission today, our deep dive goal, is to synthesize this incredible stack of sources you've shared with us. We're going to go beyond the headline and dissect the biological, the evolutionary, and the behavioral secrets that created this anti-cancer powerhouse.
We'll get into exactly how the resistance works, why evolution demanded such an extreme adaptation.
And most importantly, what all this means for human health, for aging, and for the future of medicine.
So to really wrap your head around their cancer immunity, we have to start with their radical approach to longevity. See, naked mole rats don't just live long. They defy the entire concept of biological aging.
And the term for that is negligible senescence.
Negligible senescence. It's a state that's, well, it's almost impossible to imagine for us. We know that for almost every other species, aging means increasing frailty. It means your risk of dying goes up exponentially the older you get.
Right. It's a curve that gets steeper and steeper.
Precisely. For humans, once you're past your peak reproductive years, that biological clock starts ticking faster. Your mortality rate roughly doubles every 8 years or so.
But the NMR just ignores that script entirely.
They do. Their mortality rate barely increases with age, if it even increases at all.
So what does that actually mean? A 30-year-old naked mole rat, which is ancient for a rodent, has about the same chance of dying in the next year as a 5-year-old.
That is the key metric. And if you translate that to us, it's not just about lifespan, it's about health span. It would be like an 80-year-old person having the physical vigor, the organ health, and the statistical risk profile of a 20-year-old.
So,
And this biological persistence, it isn't just skin deep. Their organs don't really deteriorate. Their cognitive function stays remarkably high. And crucially, their fertility doesn't crash.
the queen keeps going.
The queen can keep reproducing well into her 20s for decades. So that tells you right away that the evolutionary investment in this species wasn't in fast turnover. It was all placed on long-term somatic maintenance.
Okay, that's a critical phrase we need to nail down. Somatic maintenance.
Think of soma as the body. Everything except the germline, the sperm and eggs. Somatic maintenance is all the biological effort, the energy, the cellular machinery, the constant repair that's dedicated to keeping that body in perfect working order.
So for most mammals, evolution kind of says, okay, you've reproduced, that's enough maintenance, we're done here.
Pretty much, nature can take its course. But for the NMR, evolution's mandate was you must maintain this body flawlessly for 40 years because the colony needs you.
And that long-term requirement, that need to stay functional for decades, that's what forced them to develop such an extreme cancer defense.
It had to. If you're going to have trillions of cell divisions over 30 or 40 years, you will get cancer unless your defenses are multiple layers deep and incredibly sensitive.
So where does that defense start? What's the first layer?
It starts with something we call supercharged cell cycle checkpoints.
Okay, so let's start with the human baseline. We have a pretty good mechanism called contact inhibition, right?
We do. It's a basic failsafe. When our cells grow and divide, they naturally stop when they physically touch their neighbors. It prevents overcrowding.
It's like a biological traffic light. Red light means stop, the lane is full.
A good way to put it. But cancer cells are, notorious for just running that red light. They keep pushing, keep dividing, and they form a mass tumor.
And this is where the NMR is just on another level.
A completely different level. Their cells stop dividing way, way earlier. They don't wait for physical contact. They slam on the brakes the moment they simply sense crowding in the area.
So it's not a bumper-to-bumper system. It's more like they have these incredibly sensitive proximity sensors.
Exactly. Our system waits until you bump the car in front of you. Their system stops when the cars are still a car length apart. By preventing cells from even getting close enough to pile up, they stop that uncontrolled growth right at the source.
It's like they prevent the tumor before the first microscopic traffic jam can even form. But I have to ask, what's the trade-off? If their checkpoints are that sensitive, doesn't it slow down necessary things like wound healing?
That's an excellent question. And yes, it does. It speaks to their whole life strategy. They are not fast-paced animals. Their cell division is slow, which connects to their meticulous DNA repair, which we'll get to.
So they prioritize stability over a quick fix.
Always. In their harsh but stable underground world, long-term structural integrity is worth more than a rapid patch job.
Okay, so they stop growth early. But what happens if that signal gets bypassed somehow, or if DNA damage happens for another reason?
Then the next layer kicks in, the ultimate internal cleanup crew. We're talking about the famous tumor suppressor pathways, mostly centered around the P16 and P53 genes.
The guardians of the genome, we have these too. They detect serious DNA damage, and if they find it, they can force a cell into permanent dormancy, or just tell it to self-destruct.
Right, that's apoptosis, or programmed cell death. But the naked mole rat has taken the standard system and, well, they've turbocharged it. It's not that they have more copies of the genes, like we see in elephants. Their versions are just hyper-alert and hyper-effective.
So their alarm system is set to detect a puff of smoke, not a raging fire.
A much lower threshold. Their P16 signaling, for example, is activated by levels of stress that our cells would just ignore. And the consequence, driven by P53, is immediate and brutal.
What's the role?
The rule is simple. If you mess up once, you're done. There are no second chances for a potentially cancerous cell. They just do not tolerate genomic instability at all. That aggressive housekeeping means the first few critical mutations that lead to cancer almost never get a chance to stick around.
So it's a twofold strategy inside the cell. First, don't divide unless you have to. And second, if you show any sign of damage, you are immediately eliminated.
It's a classic belt and suspenders approach, but what is truly groundbreaking, and what the sources all point to as maybe the biggest discovery, is that their defense system isn't just inside the cell.
It's external too, in the space between the cells.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting. This brings us to high molecular weight hyaluronan, HMWHA, the secret goo.
It sounds a bit whimsical, doesn't it? But HMWHA is probably the molecular cornerstone of their resistance.
So what is it? I know hyaluronan is something we have.
We do. It's a common sugar-based molecule. It's part of the extracellular matrix, that meshwork that gives structural support to our tissues. We use it for things like joint lubrication and skin elasticity. You see it in cosmetics all the time.
Right, but the NMR version is different.
It's a super version. They produce hyaluronan chains that are 5 to 10 times longer than the ones in humans or mice. The sources describe it as filling the space between their cells like a dense, highly viscous, shock-absorbing gel.
So let's visualize that. If the space between our cells is like a thin broth.
The space between naked mole rat cells is like thick honey, or maybe pressurized jello.
And why does that physical difference matter so much for stopping tumors?
It matters in three interconnected ways. It's a physical, a chemical, and a migratory blockade all in one.
Okay, let's break that down. The physical barrier.
The dense matrix of these super long HMWHA chains physically restricts cell movement and division. A cancer cell needs space to proliferate, and this goo simply denies it that room.
So in our bodies, a rogue cell can just start pushing its neighbors aside. In the NMR, that cell is essentially imprisoned by its own scaffolding. It can't generate the force to push through.
Correct. But second, it's also chemically active. It's not just inert goo. The presence of these long chains actively signals to the cells around it, activating their tumor suppressor pathways. It's an environmental brake. It sends out a constant chemical signal saying, stay quiet, remain stable, do not grow.
Wow. And the third way, that's to do with metastasis, right?
Yes, and this is maybe the most critical part. The cancer that kills us is usually not the primary tumor. It's when those cells detach and spread.
Metastasis.
Right. And metastasis requires cells to break free and migrate through that extracellular matrix. This dense, viscous HMWHA makes that physically and chemically much, much harder. It's a molecular blockade that seals off the tumor and prevents cells from ever getting clearance to leave.
And the sources highlight some pretty crucial experiments that really nail this down.
This is where the causal link becomes undeniable. Researchers took naked mole rat cells and genetically engineered them to stop making the long-chain hyaluronin.
And what happened?
The cells immediately started dividing abnormally and became susceptible to cancer.
And then they did the reverse, which for human research is the really exciting part. They took this engineered HMWHA and put it into standard mouse cells.
Which are notoriously cancer-prone. And those mouse cells showed a measurable, significant increase in cancer resistance.
So the molecule itself is a transferable anti-cancer agent. It works across species.
It does. It doesn't rely on the whole suite of other NMR adaptations to work. That single molecule is a potent tumor suppressor, and that's why it is a massive, massive target for cancer prevention research right now.
But the arsenal doesn't stop there. Beyond the goo, there's their whole strategy of maintenance.
Yes, a strategy of slow, meticulous maintenance, especially when it comes to their DNA.
We often talk about the pace of life.
Mm-hmm.
A mouse lives fast, reproduces fast.
And their cellular strategy is fast and a bit sloppy. A mouse is optimized for speed. They need to reproduce quickly. So the evolutionary investment in perfect DNA repair is minimal because, frankly, they don't expect to live long enough for a few errors to matter.
Speed over accuracy.
Exactly. The naked mole rat lives for 40 years. It absolutely cannot afford a single sloppy replication cycle.
So their strategy is quality over quantity.
Or quality over speed. Their cells divide more slowly. They spend far more time and energy proofreading and repairing their DNA. And the outcome, over decades, is a drastically lower mutation rate. They're essentially starving the fire of the fuel it needs, which is mutations.
And this meticulous approach goes beyond DNA to protein management as well.
It does. As we age, we accumulate damaged, misfolded proteins. And these aggregates cause cellular stress, tissue dysfunction, disease. Think of things like Alzheimer's.
But the NMRs just stay clean.
They maintain exceptionally stable proteins, even when you subject them to stress in the lab. They do this because they have highly efficient cellular cleanup systems, specifically very high proteasome activity.
The proteasome is the cell's garbage disposal.
That's a great way to think of it. It's a little complex that identifies and shreds damaged proteins, recycling them. Theirs is just constantly running at peak efficiency, clearing out the junk before it can cause any problems.
It all comes back to that fanatical somatic maintenance.
It does. Which brings us to maybe the weirdest piece of their biology, their relationship with oxidative stress.
For decades, the story has been that oxidative stress from free radicals causes aging, and antioxidants are the cure.
We're constantly told to eat blueberries, eliminate free radicals.
But the naked mole rat flips that script.
Completely. They still produce and experience oxidative stress. But instead of trying to aggressively eliminate it with antioxidants, their cells just tolerate it. They've evolved machinery that's robust enough to withstand these metabolic byproducts without suffering the damage that leads to mutations in our cells.
So it's not about avoiding the punch, it's about being able to take it without flinching.
Exactly. It suggests the key to longevity might not be frantic defense, but rather incredible resilience. Their cells just don't panic under stress, which is a huge advantage, especially when you consider the kind of environment they actually live in.
Okay, so we've established that biologically, the naked mole rat is an absolute fortress against cancer. But an arsenal this complex doesn't just emerge by chance. So we have to transition now to the why. What were the intense evolutionary pressures that forced this?
Well, whenever you see radical biological divergence, you should look for a radical environment. And the naked mole rat lives in one, the hot, arid, semi-deserts of East Africa.
Well, the surface is deadly. Scorching heat, no water, predators everywhere.
So they were forced underground. And their lineage is ancient. They split off from their closest relatives maybe 30 or 40 million years ago. That's a lot of time for extreme divergence.
And their whole life underground revolves around one thing, right? The food.
It all comes down to the food. They eat these large, scattered underground tubers. Finding one is like finding a vault of treasure. They're rare, they're massive, and it takes a huge cooperative effort to find them and harvest them.
So the evolutionary problem is acute. Your food is unpredictable, it's hard to find, and if you try to leave the burrow to find your own, you die.
For an individual rodent, that's a recipe for extinction. So the answer was cooperation or death. And that necessity forged the single most defining trait of their existence: eusociality.
And this is just mind-bending for a mammal.
Yeah.
Eusociality, living like an insect colony.
Like ants or bees, yes. One reproductive queen, a few breeding males, and the rest of the colony, the vast majority, are sterile workers and soldiers who just dedicate their lives to the group.
Why did this evolve? It's so rare in mammals.
The sources point to three key factors. First, that high cost of dispersal, leaving the tunnel is a death sentence. Second, the resources are clumped and defensible. That tuber is worth protecting. And third, the extreme environmental risk means that going it alone is a terrible bet.
So the whole evolutionary game just changes. For a normal mammal, selection favors reproducing as fast as you can because you might die tomorrow.
Exactly. But in the NMR colony, most workers will never reproduce. So natural selection stops prioritizing quick reproduction and shifts its focus entirely onto the longevity and the functional capacity of the group.
The evolutionary logic becomes live long, don't break, don't mutate.
Precisely. Acquiring those layered, fanatical cancer resistance mechanisms wasn't some biological quirk. It was an absolute prerequisite for their entire life history strategy to work. They had to solve the cancer problem to make their long-lived cooperative society viable.
What's really amazing is how the demands of their environment, of the tunnels themselves, seem to have inadvertently set them up for cancer resistance, these pre-adaptations.
Yes, let's talk about hypoxia.
Low oxygen. Their tunnels aren't exactly full of fresh air.
Not at all. They live in low oxygen, high carbon dioxide environments. It would be deadly to us. Their adaptations are incredible. For short periods, they can switch their entire metabolism to run on fructose, completely bypassing the need for oxygen.
A trick we thought was only possible in plants. But what's the cancer connection?
For our cells, hypoxia is a huge driver of aggressive cancer behavior. Low oxygen signals stress, which triggers pathways that fuel tumor growth and genetic instability.
Cancer loves a low oxygen environment.
It does. But in the naked mole rat, that link is severed. Their cells evolved to be stable and functional despite low oxygen. By solving that environmental problem, they inadvertently suppress the very mechanism that aggressive cancers rely on. Their cells just don't panic when oxygen levels drop.
So the environment itself forced them to evolve a cellular stability that directly counters a primary driver of human cancer. That's incredible.
You see the same pattern with their skin? They're naked for a reason. The burrows are hot and humid. Fur would be lethal.
So they lost the hair but needed to keep the protection.
And they compensated with that wrinkled, thickened skin. But again, there's a trade-off. That tough skin is under constant stress and low-level damage from rubbing against the tunnel walls.
Which means evolution had to reward an even stronger, more hypersensitive tumor suppression system to protect those skin cells.
It's an arms race. The external pressure intensified the need for internal stability, and you see it again in their sensory experience, specifically their resistance to pain.
Right, they're famously insensitive to acid.
Yes, because the high CO2 in the tunnels creates a naturally acidic environment in their tissues. If they had our pain response, they would be in a state of constant chronic agony.
So they just evolved to dial down that pain signal.
They did. And the evolutionary payoff for cancer resistance is massive. Because they don't feel that constant pain, they don't suffer from a related problem, chronic inflammation.
Which we know is a huge promoter of aging and cancer in humans.
Cancer thrives on inflammation. It's like fertilizer for tumors. Naked mole rats, because of their modified pain and immune response, have incredibly low levels of chronic inflammation. They've created an environment that is distinctly unfriendly to cancer cells.
An inflammation shield, built out of a need to cope with a stuffy environment.
It's all connected. The resistance isn't one trick. It's the result of stacking all these environmental necessities on top of each other.
Which brings us back to Peto's paradox. The idea that bigger animals don't get more cancer, even though they have more cells.
Right, and every long-lived species has had to solve it, but they all solve it in different ways.
Elephants, for example, they just have tons of copies of P53, that main tumor suppressor gene.
About 20 copies. So they use massive redundancy. Whales, on the other hand, invested in incredibly sophisticated DNA repair systems.
But the naked mole rat, again, did it differently.
They used their unique life history. Their solution wasn't massive redundancy of one gene, but layered multi-point suppression.
The early contact inhibition to stop growth before it starts.
The HMWHA goo to physically restrict it.
And the hypersensitive zero tolerance signaling to eliminate any cell that makes a single mistake.
It's a comprehensive approach that just confirms the thesis. To get this kind of longevity in this kind of environment, cancer resistance had to be the absolute foundation of their biology.
Okay, so we've covered the cellular fortress and the evolutionary pressures that built it. But the sources make a really strong case that we can't stop there. Their behavior, their social structure, it's not a side note. It actively feeds back and controls their physiology.
Absolutely. For the naked mole rat, the individual is completely subservient to the colony. Their world is one of permanent darkness. It's driven by touch, by smell, by vibration. Vision is almost irrelevant.
And this leads to that fascinating concept you mentioned, that they're not a collection of individuals, but a distributed organism.
That phrase is so powerful because it really explains how they function. Roles are fluid diggers, foragers, defenders. And these roles shift based on the colony's immediate needs. And the biology of the workers is directly controlled by the queen.
She's the linchpin. And she maintains her dominance in the sterility of the colony, not so much through brute force, but through constant interaction.
Right. It's subtle shoving, trampling, and the strategic use of pheromones. It's constant active behavioral signaling.
This is pure behavioral control of physiology.
It is. The workers are physically capable of reproducing, but the stress and the chemical signals from the queen suppress their reproductive hormones. If you remove the queen, those hormones reactivate.
So they aren't infertile. They are behaviorally convinced not to reproduce.
That's a perfect way to put it. And that tight social control ensures stability.
Which immediately translates into a very low conflict colony. They're all highly related, so helping a relative is just helping your own gene survive.
Kin selection on steroids.
Yeah.
And it results in extreme cooperation. There are no freeloaders. The default is collaborative survival.
But the most profound link between their behavior and their longevity has to be their stress response. This is another place where they just flip the script on us.
Completely. When we, as individualistic mammals, experience stress, isolation, conflict, we trigger the fight-or-flight response. We get a huge spike of cortisol.
And we know that chronic cortisol is incredibly damaging. It fuels inflammation, it damages DNA, it accelerates aging.
Our stress response is designed for a short-term escape, and it's terrible for long-term health. The naked mole rat had to evolve a different way.
So what happens when they get stressed?
Stress leads to social seeking. Instead of aggression or withdrawal, they actively seek physical contact. Huddling, being groomed, those things actively reduce their stress hormones. The group itself is a social buffering system.
Their solution to stress is literally to hug it out.
Essentially, yes. The physical act of group contact stabilizes the individual's physiology.
Which loops right back to the biology. This low-stress, low-conflict environment, where everyone is constantly buffered by the group, directly feeds into those extremely low levels of chronic inflammation we talked about.
The behavior reinforces the longevity.
And their social structure even dictates their language.
It does. They use chirps and grunts to coordinate. And studies have shown that colonies develop distinct dialects, their own accents. A young mole rat has to learn its colony's specific dialect.
That's learned vocal culture in a mammal that's basically blind.
It just emphasizes how crucial that social coordination is for the survival of the distributed organism.
And finally, their behavior over a lifetime really confirms the success of that negligible senescence. We don't see them slow down.
We don't. Old naked mole rats remain active. They keep working with minimal cognitive or physical decline. They die functional. Their social code and their longevity strategy are perfectly aligned, optimized for decades of stable functional output.
Okay, let's synthesize all of this. We started with this incredible cancer paradox, a mouse-sized animal that lives 40 years and just doesn't get cancer.
And we've seen that the key takeaway is that the naked mole rat didn't evolve one silver bullet. Cancer resistance isn't a single gene, it's an emergent property.
It's the necessary outcome of a whole life history strategy that was optimized for extreme longevity and fanatical body maintenance.
All driven by those harsh environmental constraints. The low oxygen, the unpredictable food.
And they made profound evolutionary trade-offs to get there. They gave up good vision, they gave up individual reproduction, they gave up speed. But in return, they gained longevity, incredible cellular stability, and this multi-layered defense against cancer.
Evolution made them hard to kill by making them extremely stable, and that convergence has fundamentally reshaped how scientists think about whether cancer is truly inevitable.
The NMR proves that aging and cancer are intrinsically linked, and that mammalian biology is far more plastic than we ever thought.
Which leads to the current research. The sources outline several major avenues, all focused on how we can translate this stability to humans.
And the biggest target is that HMWHA, the secret goo.
It is. The most immediate goal is creating synthetic, high molecular weight hyaluronan therapies. If we can synthesize that super long polymer and deliver it safely, we could potentially introduce an external, physical, and chemical tumor suppressor into human tissues. It's a completely new strategy for prevention.
It's a total shift from curing cancer after it happens to actively blocking its formation from the start.
And researchers are also looking at drugs that could mimic that supercharged cell cycle checkpoint, making our own cells more sensitive to crowding.
It's all moving toward prevention, trying to enforce stability long before a tumor ever has a chance to develop.
But there is a crucial note of caution in all the sources. You can't just copy-paste one piece of mole rat biology into a human.
Right, because their systems all evolved together as an integrated package.
Precisely. If you just crank up the sensitivity of our P53 to their level, but you don't also have their slow, meticulous DNA repair, or you don't get rid of the chronic inflammation from our high-stress lives, well, the aggressive cell death might cause more harm than good.
The stability comes as a package deal.
It does. But the philosophical contribution is immense. They prove that extreme longevity and cancer immunity are biologically achievable in a rodent. The mechanisms are known. The roadmap for radical cancer prevention has been laid out.
So, to recap the whole system, tight control over cell division,
The physical and chemical blockade from the HMWHA.
slow, excessive DNA and protein repair,
Minimized inflammation.
and the behavioral systems that use sociality that reinforce low stress and low conflict.
It's the ultimate biological proof of concept. It shows what happens when evolution selects for stability and cooperation over speed and competition.
They are, quite simply, the creature that evolution built to last.
And here is the final provocative thought for you to consider. The sources all demonstrate that the social life of the naked mole rat actively controls its physical longevity by suppressing damaging stress hormones in favor of colony stability. And this raises an important question for us. What invisible biological cost are we paying as highly individualistic, fast-paced mammals prioritizing competition and high-stress lives? Compared to their stable, slow-life strategy, what could a little less stress and a little more cooperation, enforced through better social buffering, do for human longevity and our fight against disease? Perhaps the cure for aging isn't just in the lab, but in the community.